So, Megan, and I asked you this beforehand. I want to make sure I say this right. Megan Chiarello, is that correct?
That is correct.
Oh, can I emphasize it more though? Chiarello.
Chiarello.
Chiarello. I told you beforehand. My wife, she has a maiden name that is in Italian descent, and so her maiden name is actually Zodarelli, like Zodarelli, but they kind of Americanized it when they came over. I don't know how many generations back, if it was great grandparents or great, but they changed it to Arel. So Zodarelli got turned into Arel because I don't know if they were trying to hide their Italian heritage or something like that. And now, like I said, she's a Smith, and so she has a really, really boring last name. But I love Chiarello, so I'm glad I got that right.
Yes, and it is so true. They also, they couldn't understand it, so they would only hear like a little bit of the name, and that's how they shortened it sometimes too. So like my father's mother, her maiden name was like Capparelli or Kappa something, and they just couldn't understand it, and they said Kappa.
Yeah,
and it got shortened.
That's
right.
funny. Yeah, like, well, no, your last name is now Kappa. I love how they change it for you. You don't have a choice, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, Megan Chiarello, thank you so much for coming from Florida, right? Tampa, Florida, is that correct? Or nearby Tampa?
Yeah, I just moved from Miami to North Florida.
Okay.
Yes, but I've been remote for years. So our company's based in PA, and our executives are all over the country.
Well, that's how it works now. I'm in Texas, and the rest of my company is in Salt Lake City, Utah. I mean, obviously, if 2020 taught us anything, it's that you can essentially work from anywhere in most jobs nowadays, and you don't have to physically be present. So do you like North Florida versus Miami? Like, it's got to be a totally different vibe, right?
Totally different vibe. I went to college there, actually.
Where?
University of North Florida.
I have my notes here. North Florida. Okay. What city is that in, though?
It is Jacksonville.
It is Jacksonville.
Yes.
Okay.
And Jacksonville is so big. There's so many different pockets. So it is almost like a homecoming in a way. But yes, I love it up there. Totally different vibe. Miami is exciting. It's fast-paced, but it has changed in 2 years.
Has it?
With COVID. Oh, yes.
Well, so I was there pre-COVID, like right before it hit. We were down there for an event, and with a couple of my colleagues, and that's the first time I'd been to like Miami and stayed there for a while, and I was like, oh my God, this city never stops partying, never stops dancing. Like everywhere you walk, people are just like dancing on a sidewalk. I'm like, it's the vibe there. It's like you enter a party for a couple days, and then when you leave, you're like, oh, I can like relax again. But there's some energy about it that's great, but I don't know if I could stay there for a long period of time.
Agreed. Yeah. Yes. No, it's definitely lively, and you have culture and a big Latin presence and influence. So it is such a beautiful city. But a lot of Northerners came after COVID, and they sold their houses. They didn't need to be in New York or Jersey. I think I read like 33,000 just licenses from New York and New Jersey were transferred to Florida in 2020. Just that state alone.
Just that state alone.
Yeah,
well,
those two states alone.
Well, I feel like everybody used to come to Florida, right? Because it was like the retirement place, and it's a beautiful place, and affordable, and it was obviously a nice state. And then now it's like that it got accelerated like crazy. Texas, we got a lot of the West Coast transplants. They came to Texas, and I feel like everybody in the Northeast just shot straight down the East Coast and went to Florida. But so if you don't mind, obviously we're starting to talk about personal background and those sorts of things. I'd love to spend a few minutes letting the audience get to know you, personally, as much as you'd like to share your story, as well as, education. There's one question I really want to ask you about poli-sci, so we're going to get into that. But tell me, your journey to today being the marketing maven, social selling strategist, campaign buff, corporate storyteller, or the VP of marketing for WellNet. I'd love to hear your story.
Oh, thank you. I'd like to say I don't really think I'm that interesting, but everyone does have a cool story. Yeah, I mean, I come from a family of super hard workers. My dad had his own business for a while. My mom was in the insurance space. So I grew up with just a very, very strong work ethic. And that's kind of it's in my blood. It's at New York. My parents are from New York. So I just have always been very active in college. I was involved in student government and my sorority. And literally right out of school, started working for a company that ran a conference for the health insurance space. And so I have only known employee benefits. And personally, I love kind of being, and not the word trailblazer, but I like being a young woman in this space because it's a fresh voice and you do stand out, but in a way that you can get noticed for good and make a difference and share ideas. So I'm definitely I'm somebody who kind of likes to be different.
Well, I love it. So obviously we connected via LinkedIn, as it seems like all of the connections that I make nowadays are through LinkedIn, and you do a fantastic job, and I'm certainly going to pick your brain a little bit about your strategy there. But I do love that you said you're kind of injecting a different voice, right? A different perspective, a younger perspective, the female perspective as well. Obviously, you don't get too much into the insurance side, but you do market insurance, and your career seems to have revolved around insurance the entire time. So walk me through that first step. Like, how do you get that first job out of school? What was it like? What did you think about insurance when you got in? Give me a little bit of the skinny there.
Oh yeah, like I think most of us, you fall into it. And it was very like I was thrown in. I didn't know anything about the space. I was trying to sell an event that I didn't know who was supposed to attend, who the players were. And I had to get out of my comfort zone and like go to other conferences to learn. And I would just go booth to booth, ask them what they did. And then all of a sudden it clicked. So I really just learned through going to the events, talking to the different players, talking to the carriers. It was an exciting time too. 10 years ago we had ACA was blowing up. There was I think there was a lot of dialogue in the space too, which allowed me to really kind of immerse myself and learn, because there was so many different things happening that were shaking. Like the industry hadn't really been shaken up in a while.
Yeah, and I think it's fair. And I like the fact that you said you kind of learned on the job. I think a lot of people get scared. I talked to a gentleman the other day that he's like, well, I'm, come from the carrier side, but, I don't know about the broker world. And I'm like, well, most people that get hired on the broker side, a lot of them don't have any experience in insurance at all, let alone carrier side experience. And there's this perception that if you don't have, specific industry knowledge or insurance knowledge, that you shouldn't get into it. And I can tell you absolutely the opposite is the case. Insurance products and language, anybody can learn if you bring your particular skill set, you as a person, your ability to sell, your personality. The rest of it kind of follows suit and is fairly straightforward. I did the same thing, stumbled into insurance and was a claims adjuster for Liberty Mutual right out of college.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was doing. They trained me on like a 10-day little training program, and they're like, all right, good luck. Here's some cases to manage. And you're like, well, I guess I'll figure it out. So you kind of figured it out though, on the job, learning, talking to people. How long did it take it for it to kind of click with you though? Was it 6 months, a year? What was the time frame?
Yeah, I think because in the environment I worked in, we ran a conference. We had online publications. It was the Employer Healthcare and Benefits Congress, which now has rebranded. So it did happen very quickly. I mean, I was able to interview a lot of different vendors and solution experts in the space. We were creating certification programs. So we were kind of building things as I was learning. And one day just the light bulb went off and I was like, oh, wait. Insurance brokers sell to companies, and companies have
like,
employee benefits.
What's that? When somebody's got like the lines on the wall and they're trying to put together
True
like
crime.
Yeah, exactly. I had the same thing with self-funding after about 6 months of doing that on the broker world. Where it's like, oh, that's what this thing does, and that's how this interacts with that, and all of a sudden you're like, I get it now, and you feel like, why did it take me so long to connect the dots? But that's, there's a lot of, I'd say jargon. There's a lot of language that's kind of made up for insurance, and we all sound really cool when we use it. But did you have a perception of what insurance was when you got this job, or did you just kind of embrace it with open arms?
Oh, of course. I mean, I think everyone comes into it thinking it's stale, it's boring, it's individual health or like life insurance. So I think, as an industry, we are still overcoming that hurdle of
stigma.
Like, the stigma and driving new talent and retention. Actually, a few years ago, I was the Vanguard chair for NAHU, and one of our projects was an internship playbook where independent agencies could basically create an internship with steps and guides, and really the goal is to like attract and retain young talent because they come in for a few years. They might stay on the carrier side. They're not shifting to become a broker, and they're not. I think it's a big challenge in our industry because of the stigma.
Well, I'm trying to do my part to make it cool and have cool people on and talk about it. Whether or not this, sometimes I feel like this is somewhat directed at the audience of people that know insurance at all, and like let's try to frame it in such a way that it does attract people to be interested in the subject that we both happen to be interested in. But I can tell you I was the exact same way. I almost had this negative perception of what insurance was and the big bad insurance company, and they do wrong and they're evil and blah, blah, blah. And then you get on the other side, I very quickly realized that there's, two stories to be told. And so all of a sudden I'm going, well, actually this insurance thing isn't so bad. And then you kind of figure out what parts of it you enjoy. I do want to ask you though, you did a political science. So how does political science get you into insurance, or what were the aspirations with that as a major?
Yeah, poli-sci, the other route is law school usually. But what I fell in love with was campaign management.
Okay.
Which is marketing.
Okay. Yeah, true.
And so in hindsight, you look back, and I loved campaign management. I worked on a few local campaigns, did some internships in North Florida and Southern Georgia, and I loved like how you identify personas and voting behavior and all of that great stuff. You're segmenting and you're speaking to a certain audience and you're calling out their pain and how you can solve it.
Yeah.
That's marketing.
It's marketing 101. Well, did you yourself have aspirations politically, or did you just enjoy the campaigns for other people?
Right. I actually did not have political aspirations.
Okay.
But I worked with a lot of people that did. And so I always envisioned myself, I even say this in the corporate space too. I'm a great number 2, number 3. Like I love to lead. I love to make a contribution and influence, but I don't want the buck to stop with me.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay. I've learned a lot about myself, through my career and like what I want, and knowing that is powerful.
No, I would say absolutely. Like, I think the recognition of that and the admission of that out loud. Some people have this idea that if they are not the number one, or if they are not calling the shots, then they're somehow a failure.
Absolutely.
But you look at every great leader in any organization, private or public sector or whatnot, there's always a back room, and there's typically a confidant, a right-hand man, a right-hand gal, of course, that is really probably doing a lot of the calling of the shots. And they're also giving, it's kind of like the idea of, a comedian is the court jester. They're the only one that can tell the king the truth, right? Every king has somebody that's their confidant in private that's really steering kind of the ideas and the decision-making process. And so I think that's awesome that you have that recognition. And that way you're not trying to wedge yourself into a space that makes you uncomfortable or put you in a position maybe to fail because that's not maybe your particular skill set or your desire to do it. So anyways, kudos to you for saying that. I think that's great. So let's get into it, right? We've been chatting for 15 minutes, and I appreciate, again, you coming down. I'm very, very grateful for you making the journey to Texas. But let's talk about the subject, right? We're not talking self-funding, and you even told me beforehand, you're like, please don't make me talk about like the product, and I'm here in 1,000 words or less. Tell me what self-funding. No, but so we're going to talk about the marketing of self-funding, which I think is fascinating because I've talked to some other folks that do market certain things, but you're talking about marketing a product that I love to talk about and telling the story of the product. So what is your role of VP of Marketing at WellNet? Let me give you the floor for that.
Absolutely. I think the role, let me take a step back. I've taken a position on what I believe this role should be and partnering with leadership, and we've totally reimagined what a vice president of marketing or a marketing leader will do. So our responsibility first and foremost is to create resources and educate so advisors have ammo and have resources to tell the self-funding story. When we sat down and we said, what do we want to do? It was, we want to give ammo to the advisors so that they can be the self-funded hero and they can tell the story. My role is to create content, collateral, resources, education, anything that's really sticky and tangible that not only will help a broker sharpen their skills, but also that they can take it out to their clients.
Well, I love that, and I've had a couple folks that I've talked to here, but as well as just other webinars I've joined, and so many people lose the concept of you're telling a story at the end of the day. This journey from being fully insured to self-funded, there's a story, there's a narrative associated with it, and when you tell the narrative rather than just only educate and only, pound the fundamentals and the knowledge, if you were to do that, you're going to lose people. But if you can tell the story in such a way that does educate those folks, but simplifies the understanding of it so they can tell that story in turn, which is exactly what you're describing, that's the right approach. If I were to give you a nod of approval, I'd certainly do that. So when you say reimagine, though, what was the approach beforehand of this role versus when you kind of took it over?
I think WellNet historically always kind of took that stance. So WellNet was creating case study videos that told the story. It's scenario based. They focused on specific verticals and niches that thrive. So that because we can talk about this. Self-funding isn't for every business and every industry, and we talk about that. So that was part of the historical story with WellNet too. Is we're going to put out case studies and success stories of the industries that it makes sense.
Okay.
So when we sat down, we're like, hey, we want to do that, but we want to take it to the next level. We want to not only have videos, but we want to have series. We want to have live casts. We want to bring on more of our clients and our champions, and we've done that. We've done that super successfully in 2021. Every live cast that we've done, we've made sure to have an employer with us. It's all scenario based. I mean, when you're talking about self-funding, it's really, this is how it looks and feels. This is what's going to look like this year. It's a 3 to 5 year journey. So that's really important, is having that voice of an employer who's been there and really having them talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, and I love that too, because sometimes I'll talk to vendors, or especially when there's like new technologies being developed. We have this problem. We're constantly trying to simplify the messaging and tell the story around what we do. But you talk to a vendor that's created some new idea or some new product that's connecting different things, and you talk to them for an hour and you go, I still don't quite understand what you do. And you're just, I always have to drill it down to, okay, well, give me the ideal group. And if I was this, how would you make it work in practicality? Because the theory is difficult sometimes to understand, but when you can kind of drill that concept down into reality and how it actually works in application, that's when, the aha moment that we were talking about earlier makes sense for me. And I've watched you guys' videos. I think they're great. They're super well produced. You guys do cut them up in the appropriate length, sound bites, I would say, so that like it's just a quick snapshot of what we do, or here's an idea, or here's a solution for this problem. And you guys do a fantastic job. So from a perspective of somebody consuming your content, I think it's great. WellNet, though, we've talked about WellNet. What is WellNet? I think we should probably spend a couple minutes doing that.
Oh yeah, and we'll keep it brief.
Yeah.
So WellNet is a smarter self-funded solution. So what would take an advisor, multiple vendors to put together, we are truly a independent third-party administrator that's building and then optimizing a self-funded health plan.
Okay.
And for us, it's so simple, but it's powerful. We talk about a crawl, walk, run journey. You probably have heard that a lot. It's something that we're very passionate about. But it's a way to have companies go self-funded at a pace that works for them, where as they grow, they can have more cost-saving opportunities. But at least when they start, there'll be immediate action and immediate ways to improve quality and improve outcomes.
So would it be safe to describe it as sort of a turnkey alternative to some of the carrier-driven type products in the marketplace, or was it built exactly to do that, or am I incorrect in that assumption?
No, you are correct, and I think as the industry has evolved, so has WellNet. So as a solution expert, we've identified the voids and the needs in the industry and have evolved, including the population health management, then adding on reference-based pricing and the pharmacy. So it really is turnkey.
But it's not static, is what you're saying. There are still options, right?
Exactly.
And that's where I think some of the carriers, they don't fail. Their product is designed to do exactly what they want it to do, but they don't offer you alternatives. It's like you either take our option or you leave it. And that's what I always try to advocate in the market. I think I even created a meme the other day about, level funding versus self-funded. And if you're level funded, you're already self-funded, and you may not know it, but you are self-funded. But the way that those carrier-driven products are positioned, it's like easy button, you buy it from us. There is no other way, but we'll give you everything and you don't have to think about it. And some people are like, that's great. But I'm going, you know what? You can build that exact same thing and way better if you just have the right partners. And that sounds like exactly how WellNet is positioning themselves as a solution, right?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yes.
Well, maybe, hey, we'll cut that up. And if you want to use that little sound
Yeah,
bite.
you're hired.
I'm also like, I love when I'm asking questions because I'm reaching the point of like clarity as I'm asking questions. And from my perspective, I'm like, okay, I get it now. Well, this is great. So now you're obviously not the product person, of course. So let's establish that now. You're the marketing arm for the product. But what is it like marketing this type of product versus your standard insurance solution? How do you position it differently?
Oh, I love that question because that is exactly what we tackled this year in 2021. The problem is that a fully insured product is off the shelf. It's tangible. You can touch it. You can feel it. It's boxed in, which to your point is why when they built these level funded products, it was literally, here's our response to the solutions that self-funding would bring, but it's boxed in for you and it's really pretty. So that is the main difference. It's being able to give a self-funding solution attributes and make it tangible, and you can touch it, you can feel it in a way, you can see how it would work. So what we've done is really we've productized a self-funding solution by giving it steps and making it make sense and identifying the levels and what you get within those levels in that crawl, walk, run. And then how we layer on the customer care, the advocacy, how you drive incentives, what that member experience looks like. So it all ties together and you can sell it.
And
to
you can
somebody.
buy. Yeah, I love the term product-tize. I don't know if you guys made that up or maybe that's a common term I just never heard before. But it's exactly right because at the end of the day, you're kind of selling a funding mechanism, all the moving parts to moderate that and to manage it. But it is a product, right? I mean, it kind of is. It's repackaged, but it's all these disparate parts that work together combined into something that can be purchased. And I think it's kind of that in between, maybe an interval between that carrier level funded product and the pure partially self-funded. I'm leaning on my advisor to bring everything to the table and let's pick all these parts. There is a good step in between. It sounds like you guys kind of fit before people go all the way with self-funding. And I presume you guys probably have solutions for that as well, right? I mean,
yeah, we do. I mean, it's basically how aggressive do you want to be?
Exactly.
You kind of crank up
the volume meter. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
But I think you make a great point because the challenge with selling self-funding is you're trying to educate them. You're trying to it's overwhelming and it's so many different pieces and there's, different components to it that it doesn't have that stickiness. And I think that's where a lot of advisors fail, where if you're able to tell that story in a product that makes sense and there's a start to end, I think that's where we've seen the most success in productizing the solution.
Productizing the solution. I love it. So do you guys often get involved in the sales process with your brokers? Are you coming in and doing some education along with them? I know you're trying to teach them to tell the story, but they may not be great at it. Do you guys get brought into the fold sometimes as well?
Absolutely. And we believe in that because we know that the success of our team in having the broker actually close the deal, that's our success.
Yeah.
That's how we measure our success. So we do. I mean, we like to say we ride shotgun. We are very much side by side, and we do. We train, and we're very, very involved in the education process so that an advisor can come in and say, listen, these are the experts, and together with my strategy, my consulting, and these solutions, this is how we're gonna start the self-funded journey or ramp it up.
I love it. And it's good that I'm glad you mentioned earlier the 3 to 5 year journey. I think it's something I've tried to stress over and over again is you don't self-fund for a year and see what happens. You don't go, oh, well, that didn't work. Let's go back fully insured. You're going to screw yourself, basically. So I'm glad you guys are positioning that way. One more product question, then we'll move on. Because I know you don't want to get too much in the weeds, but tell me what the appropriate kind of group size and sweet spot and, what's the right profile of an employer that would be looking for this type of solution?
Yeah, no, I love this question because it is so important in the success of self-funding. So for us, it's, I think for any, self-funded candidate, it would be 100 to 5,000 lives, and there are typical verticals that we just do really well with: auto, manufacturing, and really privately, a lot of privately held companies too,
Okay.
because the CEO is invested in the conversation. They have more of an appetite to look at how they can save money on that side to reinvest and make it a profit center, versus a cost center.
Yeah.
So yeah, we really do well with privately held 100 to 5,000.
100 to 5,000. Okay. And so, man, that does give me an idea, right? Because we were talking about there are some iterations, I guess, of your product depending on the group size and how risk averse and or accepting of risk that they are. So 100 to 5,000, I'm sure obviously the 100-person product looks a lot different than that 5,000 life group. But that's good to know where you guys fit, because when you start, if agents are listening to this, they go, well, I've got a lot of groups in that segment. Oh, it's a pretty broad segment, but I've got a lot of groups that are 150 lives, and I've been talking to them about self-funded for years, and I just can't get them to make that leap. Perhaps this is one of those solutions that could be the right story to be told to that group that finally takes that step. I can tell you as a stop loss rep all the time, I'm presenting these numbers and they look great, and I'm like, surely this case is going to sell. They're definitely going self-funded, and you'll have that same experience year over year, because a lot of groups either just don't have the right guidance, or they get to that 1-inch line and you know what? Our renewal wasn't that bad. Let's just stay fully insured one more year. And so I love when a new product comes in the market that offers an alternative, that offers what sounds like to me, and I've never experienced it myself, so caveat that,
Right.
but it sounds like a better alternative to some of the stuff that's on the market today. So
Yeah.
kudos to WellNet. But not
the data can be scary. Like, to your point, like everyone's like, it's all about the data. You lean in with data. To the same point, almost too much data can be, that resistance.
Paralysis by analysis
exactly.
type. Yes.
Yes.
I know exactly what you're talking about. But so let's now bring it back. Can I bring it back to Megan for a while? Can we talk more about you and your social media strategy? Would that be okay?
Of course.
Of course. You're like, I was waiting for you to ask me this question. So you do a great job on LinkedIn. We connected because of that. I love when people position themselves. You keep, I'm building my own brand, my personal brand. Okay. But you do a great job of that. And this marketing maven, the social selling strategy, I love all the terminology you use. But even today, as an example, right before the podcast, you did a quick 10-second video. Hey, I'm going on Spencer's podcast. I'm excited. Like, I love that, because that's super cool, because people get to connect with you. And then eventually they'll figure out, she works for WellNet, and here's what WellNet does. And we need that solution. But you do a good job of kind of positioning yourself as the advocate for the brand, and people start to know you. So tell me about your strategy there. Was it organic? Did it happen by accident, or was that intentional?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of it was just innately knowing and seeing how LinkedIn had evolved, 5-7 years ago, even probably longer than that. I went to the first Sales Connect conference that LinkedIn hosted, which was basically rolling out their Sales Navigator product, which is taking what they did for like talent recruitment and bringing it over to sales, and this concept of social selling. It was on everyone's tongue. And I'm like, that's innately what I've been using LinkedIn for. Mm-hmm. So I've always been a big advocate of sharing yourself, sharing your solutions, and doing it organically, so that over time your connections will see it. I've never believed in, I'm going to connect with somebody, send them a cold message. I just,
oh my God.
Yeah. And like, people still do it. And I'm sure it's working. I'm sure because they're still doing it, or they feel like they have to because everybody else is.
Well, it's maybe working if you do it 1,000 times and you get 10 people to respond,
Exactly.
then it probably is working on that large of a scale. Yep. But I can tell you 100% of the time when that happens, I ignore or say no thank you, because you just connected with me and 30 seconds later I get some canned pitch to me in my messaging in LinkedIn. It's like, oh my God, like how many of you are...
Your profile looks so impressive.
Oh yeah, I was perusing your profile and you look like you have the right, skill set. You're like, you have no idea what I do you?
Exactly.
And so even though get your name wrong sometimes, it's like, hey Tom, you're like, my name is right there. When you put the message, you could at least get my name right. But I think, okay, fine. If that works, keep doing it. But you obviously have positioned yourself differently, and I think you're doing it the right way. That idea of social selling is great. I actually, my first foray into that was actually a few years ago when I was at a company called Amwins, which, I was in their stop loss division. And they, at one of our conferences, they had not a stop loss, but a LinkedIn kind of marketing expert come in and teach us the ins and outs of how to make your profile stand out and how to build it. And I kind of took that to heart. And I remember we were at some event and a lot of us from Amwins were at that table. And so I took a picture and just said something to the effect of, hey, a lot of stop loss knowledge on this at this table. And that thing got, a couple thousand views. And I'm like, I've never had a LinkedIn post have more than a couple. So maybe there's something to this. And you start figuring it out over time. But it works. I mean, the impressions that you start to get, like if you're consistent about it, and you certainly are, and you do a great job of it. So how is that has that done a good job of directing people back to WellNet? And then do you have any examples or maybe anecdotes of like a specific instance where that worked perfectly? I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the diversity of content too. So, you hear the 80-20 rule and everyone has their own belief based on the algorithm. I mean, to be honest, I'm very tried and true. So I mix a lot of my own personal content and recommendations alongside what's happening at WellNet. Mm-hmm. So, and we just try to have that mix so that we do see a return. What I've seen works, and you see a lot of like splash tagging, which I know Andy Neary, our friends Andy and Eric, someone we talk about, it's a big no-no.
Is that what that's called when you just tag a bunch of people?
Yes.
Splash tagging. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
And I actually I found that out from them. And that's something I don't like to do, but what I do is because, let me step back. It's a lot to get views on your posts now. Mm-hmm. And if you do miss a few weeks, it takes a while to get it back up. I mean, it is, if you don't use it, you lose it.
100%.
So what we do is I look at really who is engaging. I don't want to tag somebody that is not interested in what we're doing. Yeah. I look at my opens, I look at our past registrants, and then I tag them on things that I think would be important to them. Mm-hmm. So if we just hosted a SHRM livecast, where we partnered with SHRM and we did a whole like HR leaders guide. People who have registered for our self-funded insurance survey livecast and they registered for our WellNet Plus watch party. That's something. There are people who consume content like that. I'm going to tag you.
Well, especially if they're doing it they're coming back, right?
Exactly.
They're re-engaging. I'm with you there. Okay, so now now I know what it is. Splash tagging. Yeah. I've been splash tagged. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, great. Like that was relevant. Or sometimes I'm like, why am I tagged in this? And it's almost to me sometimes off-putting because if there's no association or there's no reason other than we know each other and you tag me, I may or may not engage because like you said, it's got to be something that actually there's a reason to do it. And if you splash tag me, I guess, on something hoping that I engage, like I hope I can even add something to this conversation. It's something I know nothing about or have nothing to do with. I'm probably not going to do anything other than like it because, I want to be nice. But I have found that a little bit of a kind of, I don't like it. Maybe you disagree. But again, it depends on the who and the why and the how it's done. If you're just doing it because you're trying to grow your own personal footprint and tagging a lot of people to have good engagement, then that's a little bit off-putting in my opinion.
Agreed. And I think, you are always going to have people who, even if they did register for your content, they're not going to like to be called out on LinkedIn. Yeah. And it's very much like somebody unsubscribes. It's like, you know what, that's fine. I'm doing my job as a marketer. Mm-hmm. You're not going to win everybody over, right?
Absolutely
so, for us, it's kind of like a casualty, but I truly try to do it intentional, and it is to gain awareness of a specific content piece. Like, it's not like, hey, call WellNet today, and I'm going to tag a million people.
Yeah. You're like, oh, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So obviously that's LinkedIn, but I know it's not just LinkedIn that you're using. I think it's most appropriate for professionals, especially in our industry that are connecting with brokers and advisors and employers that need to engage with our product. But do you do it on any other platforms? Are you an Instagram user or a Facebook user? What else do you use?
Yeah, we do post on all of those platforms. I am a big believer of water where you grow. So, and a lot of people have different viewpoints about this, and there's a ton of ways to do it. Like if you're going to be, if you're going to be posting, be everywhere. And but for us, we invest in a presence where we have a large following, where we have a lot of large influencers within the organization, and we cultivate like-minded connections. We do specific LinkedIn events, that you can do the event on LinkedIn. So yes, we are definitely everywhere, but I would say our strategy is to be on a platform where we know we have the most influence.
Yeah. That's just it. Like I see companies have like Twitter profiles and stuff like that, but there's like an insurance product. Is anybody on Twitter going to engage with your insurance product and then go, oh, I need to hire them? Like that's not the right target audience, right? And so I've almost put 100% of my eggs in the LinkedIn basket. Instagram seems cool, but it's more for, I get hit up for pants and, beef jerky and all sorts of stuff all the time because it's like that's the type of product that you can sell in that medium. Selling a self-funded solution probably doesn't work that well on Instagram versus somebody selling shoes. Let's just be honest.
The platform's not designed.
It's not designed for that. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So good to hear because I see some other folks using some of these platforms. It's maybe more just for pictures and a little more social than it is necessarily business related. Have you seen LinkedIn though morph to be a little bit more of what people would consider social media than pure? I think I see you nodding your head. I've noticed that's happening more often. Good or bad? What's your perspective?
I think bringing in, humanizing LinkedIn a little bit is super powerful. I do think that some of it, it's not the right platform. Not that it's TMI or, I think there is this belief that to be authentic, you can completely open the curtain and just share everything.
Yeah.
And I give kudos to those who do it. Like, if that's your strategy. But I do think there's a magic of LinkedIn where it is a B2B space and there's certain dialogue. And I think to keep the kind of the uniqueness of the platform. But it doesn't mean that you can't be yourself or talk about things that are important or get real. It's not a B2C site.
To a degree, right? There is a point, and there's one individual, I follow her, and she has some great stuff, but there's occasionally just goes like so far, and you're like, this just doesn't feel like the right channel for this. Or you mentioned the be authentic. Well, there's a point where being so authentic is you're like, why are you doing this here? Why are you crying on, like at this point when you're trying to sell me something? Where it gets it's like a little too far, and to each his own, right? I think the beauty of this is you figure out how you want to do it.
Exactly.
You find out what works. And if you want to do something, you can keep doing it, right? As long as it's civil and as long as you're professional, then, if I don't like it, I just move on. And I think that's how everything should be without getting on my soapbox.
Yeah.
Just move on if you don't like something.
Yeah, there's a difference between conversational and being too vulnerable. To where you're still in a professional space.
Yeah.
And it's a fine line.
It's a very fine line, and sometimes you have to cross it to know where the line is, and I totally get that. Well, let's talk about your bio as a corporate storyteller. We've talked about stories earlier on in this conversation, but telling stories, right? At the end of the day, that's what we're doing. Is that something that you grew up liking to do, or where's the storytelling element of your personality come from?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I actually, writing is my first love. I used to love to write. The difference with marketing is you can't be as verbose.
Sure.
And you can't paint that beautiful narrative. But no, I do love to write, and so I take a vested interest in producing the copy of most of our stuff, which probably at this point in my career, I probably should be kind of taking a little bit of a back seat, but I just love it so much. And the corporate storytelling, it's from a lot of different perspectives. So it's even like your vision and your mission statement. And so I encourage advisors and anybody listening every year to come up with a positioning playbook.
Okay.
And you can incorporate your story into your vision, your mission, your value prop, updating your boilerplate. Like those are things that you can take and pull, and that way you're always telling your story no matter where, your company is visible. And you're kind of putting in that narrative versus, we're a third-party administrator that functions. But for us, we've totally changed our mission statement, and it's we're doing whatever it takes at the right place to lower the cost of health insurance for companies and their people. It's more of taking a stance.
Yeah. You got me excited about that mission statement really quick.
And how we did that was we sat down as a team, and I listened to how they actually spoke about what we did. So a lot of times the term storytelling, it doesn't mean you're just out there sharing experiences. It's also creating a story and then beating that drum.
Yeah. Absolutely right. You have to be willing to tell the story. I think some people have some great products or great ideas, but they're so scared to actually be out in the marketplace advocating for it and espousing the virtues of their product. And I love what was you called it the playbook? What was it? What was it called again? The terminology you used?
Sure, it's a positioning playbook.
Positioning playbook. Man, I'm learning so many good nuggets from this. But I love that the positioning playbook. Even though I don't know exactly what it is, and you described it briefly, I have a pretty good sense of how that works because the terminology itself, and that's marketing at the end of the day, right? How simply can you articulate something? You mentioned being very verbose and liking to write, and that doesn't necessarily work in this channel. So like how much can I simplify? I've started to do insurance memes, which is kind of silly and it's funny, and I'll think of them at home and I'll write them up.
Yeah.
But you know what? What's beautiful about that medium is, well, one, everybody loves memes. That's how it goes. But two, it's like you can have the most basic of text and pictures articulate somewhat of a complex idea, but because it gets drilled down or distilled down to something so simple, immediately people go, I get it, or I love it, that's funny. And it's like, I love the art of how much can you take away and still communicate exactly what you're trying to communicate.
Oh, I agree. And I love that strategy. It comes down to emotion too. So like when you see something like that, like you feel what that image and what that little blurb, like you feel that. It's like when someone says, I felt that,
Yeah. I did. Like I get excited sometimes listening to other people because it's like you do such a good job and you just nailed that point. And it's like, oh, I got emotionally invested in what you're saying,
right?
Which is what you're trying to do as a marketing person. So, from that perspective, right, we're talking about storytelling. We're talking about this idea of marketing these sorts of, complex products. From a perspective that, all this history that you've got getting to this point and with WellNet as well, walk me through kind of how do you do this in the future? What's the future of marketing these products look like? Are there different mediums in which to do so? Is it more video? Is it more webinar? How do you see this industry morphing over time?
I love that question. I actually, when I was thinking about, when we kind of prepped a little bit, for me, the future of this industry is tech, talent, and I say Tesla money.
Tesla money? Okay.
So I really feel the industry is like poised just to really expand on technology advancement, AI, just a more consumer experience. Mm-hmm. And that gives us a place for self-funding to incorporate that into the solution and make it look and feel like what a consumer really, needs and wants out of a health plan. I mean, when you take away all the jargon and all the intricacy of building the health plan, at the end of the day, self-funding doesn't work if an employee is not a consumer of it. If they don't understand it, if they're not taking a vested interest in going to the right providers, into finding lower cost, accessing the lower cost medications. Yes. So I think the future of the industry is almost working backwards and looking at the consumer first.
Okay.
And then building and marketing and communicating from that, into the employer and then into the
yeah, no, and I think you're exactly right, because you can overcomplicate what you do because you're thinking, well, if I'm talking to a sophisticated broker, I need to make it where it's very technical so that only that broker or that consultant knows how to then turn around and tell it to an employer, and then whether or not even they communicate it to their employees, I guess is up to that employer. But I think it doesn't have to be that complicated. Let's set aside this notion that we have to sound really cool when we talk or above each other's heads because we want to position ourselves as just this product knowledge expert and whatever. I do think that you're right in the way that you're positioning it towards the end consumer, because ultimately they're the ones whose lives are impacted by the decisions being made up that vertical. And if you don't think about them, then you're taking the wrong approach, in my opinion. Is there what is the mix for you, like the medium of video versus the flyers versus the webinars? How often are you doing each, or have you found like the appropriate mixture of those that has been most successful, or is it constantly a work in progress?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I always say a lot of what we do is like by the book, and a lot of it's our gut.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what makes it fun. So, I mean, yeah, I do the tried and true best practices. We do. I think I'm heavier a little bit on the event-based marketing because it's just so great for lead generation, and you get people, all in one kind of sitting. But we do definitely a mix of downloads. We do a lot of social graphics. video at one point was like the end all be all, and now that everyone started doing it. So I think we do a little less heavy on the video.
Okay.
But the graphics, we're being more intentional on social. So we're mixing statements, we're mixing customer quotes and testimonials. We're sharing some of our client success and acknowledging clients that are getting awarded. So it's a nice mix. It really is like a formula of an amalgam of everything.
Yeah.
You can't go heavy on one, because if people aren't into that, you lost them.
Well, and I love you guys are being so intentional about this and understanding how important this new way of selling is to the driving the bottom line results. Because ultimately we're trying to sell. We're selling things to people and we're making money off that. But I love the way that you guys are being very scientific, if you will, about it, and understanding this new alternative. Because we talked about those folks that'll like add you and then immediately message you some canned thing. Like, I don't think that works anymore. Or if it does, you just hire a bunch of robots that they just do that all day long 10,000 times, and you cast a wide enough net, you might grab a couple of people.
Right.
But I think that the same thing with cold calling. An agent trying to cold call and pick up. I had a talk with an agent last week, and he said that same thing. It's like, I do some cold calling, but quite frankly, it's not as effective anymore. And people are getting these cold calls all the time, and they're tuning them out or they're ignoring them. So you have to reposition yourself. You have to find a new strategy. It's constantly evolving. You can't stay static in the way that you market these things. And I think, you guys are doing a fantastic job of that. So closing thoughts. We've got a couple minutes left. I'd love to hear if there's anything that you want the folks that have stuck it out this long, listen to us talk about LinkedIn and WellNet and those things. What do you want them to be thinking about?
Oh, great question. What I do want to say, though, is I think there's a lot of content out there that, especially for the advisor community, that makes it seem like being on social is really easy. Like it's an easy thing to do. And not to scare anybody away, not that it's not easy, but it does require a strategy. And like, a lot of advisors like, oh, I have like my best friend's daughter who graduated college, I have her doing social media. And, it's more than just posting a graphic, like the copy, the call to action, the voice, the conversation style, the messaging. It is so intentional. And so I think everyone should be doing it, and it should be part of your strategy. But I think there's this like narrative that like, I'm just going to pick up my phone and I'm going to create content, which you should be doing that too. But then it also requires a mix of like sitting down and having a content calendar and like, what do we want to say? Who are we speaking to? And then you write for them. And
well, that's the why part I think people forget, right? It's like, well, why are you picking up your phone and recording yourself and putting yourself out there? Is it just because you were told to do so, or just because you feel like that's the thing you're supposed to do? Well, your content will probably reflect that if you don't have any intention behind the reason why you're doing it. Fine. Again, it's like you never want to stop people from trying. I would encourage everybody, whether it's video, whether it's text, whether it's writing an article, whether it's memes, who cares? Just try it. But you have to be willing to go all in, and you have to be willing to evolve your strategy over time instead of just doing, well, I was told to make videos and I'm going to keep making them even though 2 people interact with them every time. You're like, maybe you're not quite landing and hitting the mark there. But I never want to be in a position to say, well, it's not for everybody, or you shouldn't do it, or scare people off, because I honestly do believe you should.
Absolutely.
And I was one of those people less than a year ago that didn't, and then I did, and I kept doing it, and all of a sudden it started working, and so anybody,
it's the long game.
It is the long game. It's absolutely the long game. So where can people get a hold of you for questions about WellNet, connecting with you? Obviously, LinkedIn seems the most appropriate. Where else should we get a hold of Megan Chiarello?
Yes, definitely connect with me on LinkedIn, and you can email me, mchiarello@wellnet.com. Let's start the conversation on LinkedIn, because that's where we water where we grow.
We water where we grow. And for anybody that's listening out there, and just so you know, I'll obviously have your name posted on here. And so if anybody's like, how do you spell Chiarello? We'll make sure that you don't mistake that. But thank you so much again for traveling down, for coming on. This genuinely was a pleasure to talk to you and
Same.
to learn from your marketing skills. I think I'm going to try to deploy some of the things that you suggested, because you have great ideas. So thank you again. And anybody that is interested in this conversation should absolutely check out WellNet. Sounds like an awesome company with a great solution. So that's all I got to say. Thanks, Megan.
Spencer, thank you so much.
Bye.